Well, good evening again, everybody, and welcome to another edition of TalkNL. My name is Graydon Pelley, and it's so glad to be able to share this podcast with you again this evening. And it's April the 21st. It's a beautiful sunny evening here on the West Coast, and I'm sure everybody's enjoying this wonderful weather and early spring. We see lots of people out on the go, getting their lawns raked and getting their gardens all started. And it's certainly a great treat to have this beautiful weather. Thank you again for joining us this evening. Of course, we want to welcome my sidekick, Mr. Rudy Norman, who's joining us again on the podcast as usual. And Rudy, you getting a nice weather out on the Bayvert Peninsula like we are here on the West Coast?
We had a beautiful day today, Graydon. The sun was splitting the rocks, and it was not too warm, but it was a nice cool day, and really a nice spring day, I would call it, and which is a welcome thing for. I mean, we're not even at the end of April yet, so it's really good to see.
Well, if the sun was splitting the rocks here, I'd say it was too warm, but apparently you can handle that better than I can. So
yeah, we're happy with it out this way, I tell you.
And Rudy, just to mention, we got an anniversary.
Yeah, actually, Graydon, I was surprised by this. I didn't know it really until it was brought to my attention, but apparently this is a 1-year anniversary for the live version of TalkNL. So for those of you who aren't aware or don't remember our previous iteration,
Yeah.
we started this kind of as a audio only podcast, and we release an episode once a week with a special guest and all that stuff. And then, of course, the pandemic changed everything, and everyone got into live video. So it was 1 year ago today that we started our live version of TalkNL, and here we are now. Been doing it live ever since, and we've kind of improved things a little bit. We've changed on our technologies and our systems, and done things, tried things, and what didn't work, we axed that, and we tried something else. So,
but Rudy, it's hard to believe though that a year has gone by since we started this first podcast.
You stop and think of it, Graydon, where we were a year ago. I mean, we basically did it out of necessity because we were in different places, and Zoom was becoming a big thing. I mean, now it's a household name. At that time, no one really even knew what it was.
Absolutely.
So it's crazy that a year has passed, and here we are. So.
And we've got some interesting topics again tonight to talk about, things that are Newfoundland and Labrador and affecting Newfoundland and Labrador. And we certainly want to encourage those that would be listening tonight to share your comments. And we'd like for you to speak to the issues that we're talking about, because we believe they're issues that impact and affect the future of all Newfoundlanders and Labradorians. And we want to hear what people got to say. It's not just me and you. We enjoy chatting. You and I chat at least once a day, more than that some days.
More than that some days.
Yeah, and but the thing about it is we want to hear what people got to say about these issues. And we also want to hear issues that are important to people that we might not bring up here. But let's keep it civil. Let's keep it Newfoundland and Labrador, and let's talk about what we can do to make it a better place.
Yeah. And I mean, a lot's happening in the province now, Graydon. And I mean, some people may not be aware of everything, and they may not follow everything. But I mean, these are important topics that I think we need to be discussing. Some people may find it a bit dry or boring sometimes, but I mean, hopefully we can bring some life into it and get people passionate about it. One thing that I'm really passionate about, as you know, Graydon, is. And we heard an announcement this week. I mean, we're still talking about this provincial election that we had. We're still talking about the debacle that it was, and that people are basically becoming immune to it, I think, which they should not be. But we've got an announcement now that there's going to be a committee struck in the House of Assembly an all-party committee. Basically, it's
Another
formed by
one.
another one. We've had one of these before, but they're going to form another one now. And so number one, right off the bat here, I've got a big issue with it because the committee is formed by the Liberals, so they're going to have 5 Liberals on the committee. They're going to have two progressive Conservatives, one New Democrat, and one Independent. So now, Graydon, quick calculations in my head here by doing the math: 5 Liberals and 2 plus 1 plus 1, that's 4, right? So there's going to be 9 people on the committee. 5 of them are going to be Liberals. So all of a sudden here now, I'm kind of sensing that this might have been intentional, because if the Liberals formed the committee and they stacked it with their own people, then obviously there must be some sort of ulterior motive here, is there not?
So let's go back a little bit before that. So the PCs brought a motion to the House of Assembly that they like have an independent investigation of the happenings throughout the election and what's going on, and what they can do about the Elections Act. So 21 people voted against it, 17 voted for it. So right now we are right back into the majority government rule. We vote as a bloc. We vote as a government. We're not going to agree with what these opposition people are saying. We're going to strike it down, and we're going to put something in that's more equitable, more fair, and shows more, probably less chance of being biased. So they put in a committee with 5 Liberals, 2 PCs, 1 Independent, and 1 NDP. So here we go again. Same old story. And we heard this past week on the news broadcast from the new Minister of Justice, the new Attorney General, that just because they are looking into and looking at the Election Act doesn't mean that they're admitting there was a problem with this election. Now, come on, laugh, joke. Is this for real?
Yeah. It's hard to believe that it is for real. And to be honest with you, I mean, I'm looking at this now from an outsider's perspective as just a common voter, okay? Just a guy that lives in a place that is passionate about the province, who wants to see fair and equitable treatment of as many people as possible. And I'm just astounded by the sheer arrogance of these people. And it's exactly what we feared, Graydon. I mean, the thing we feared the most has come upon us, because here we are now. There's no accountability. There's no accountability to be required, basically. Yeah. This election was, a complete sham. Everybody agrees with that, except for the people who got elected, it seems, with a couple of exceptions. Last week we talked with Independent MHH Paul Lane, and he feels it's a sham, and he's raised issues in the House of Assembly saying that he believes that there were major issues, and he's calling for an independent investigation. But the Liberal Party, I mean, they got their majority, and now they really don't care what else anybody says. They're just going to go ahead and they're going to do their own thing and give us some semblance that we have everybody's best interests at heart. And in reality, Graydon, they don't. And then they're proving that uphill and down in many different ways and many different topics that we can talk about. This being just one of them. Okay, so I'm appalled, and this is a deplorable thing to witness here. To be honest with you, I mean this all-party committee now it's basically window dressing. It's basically just an idea that people have to say, oh, look at us, look what we're doing. Right? It's only made up of people that were elected. So now all of a sudden, the people that were elected under this sham of an election, the people who actually got the votes per se, and were successful in this, now these are the people that we're going to trust to change the system. The people who just got elected under this system is the people that's going to supposedly change the system. So there's no outside experts being allowed to sit on this committee. There's no independent voices outside of the independent MHAs. There's no like I said, resident experts in democratic reform. There's no political scientists there. There's just some MHAs, partisan MHAs, who are basically just going to look at this committee as another thing that they probably get a couple extra bucks for because they get paid for all the subcommittees and stuff they sit on. And they're just going to drag their heels like they were doing before. Like you said, we saw this display before. So I mean, I'm just rattled, to be honest with you. I'm livid at this, almost enraged, to be honest with you, because I really feel that the people of Newfoundland and Labrador deserve better. They actually deserve. And I want to read something here real quick that Jim Din said. Just give me a second, Graydon, and you go ahead, and I'll find what he said.
And Rudy, the thing about it is, it seems like there's two focuses that this committee are focusing on, and that is number one, that it be interpreted for the Indigenous voters, which is an awesome idea, and it should have been done long ago. And the second thing is ensuring that people might be able to vote from home.
Right.
So these are the two. They see these as the two. They are issues, no doubt, and they're big issues. However, if this is what they're focusing on, and these are the issues that they think cause problems, and they leave it at that, then come on.
Yeah,
it's.
I want to read this. I want to read this. This is Jim Din, who's a member of the all-party committee. This all-party committee that was formed has one MHA from the NDP on the committee, and that person is MHA Jim Din. And I want to read what he said here. Okay, he said, "In what world would we come out of the election we just had, called by the government in power for their political gain, and then entrust all of the decision-making on reforming the Elections Act to that same group of people? Newfoundlanders and Labradorians should be outraged at this blatant attempt to control the outcome and recommendations that come from this committee. I am." So now this is a member of the committee, Graydon. And basically what he's saying is the Liberals called an opportune election because they saw the poll results and they saw that they were ahead, and they thought, my goodness, this is a perfect time now because we're going to get a majority government. Then there was arguably alleged voter suppression throughout the province, and that's before the courts, and that's why I say allegedly. And so the Liberals put us in that position where we had to face a pandemic, and because of that, thousands of people allegedly didn't get a chance to vote that should have gotten a chance to vote. And so allegedly thousands of votes weren't counted as a result.
Allegedly people were allowed to vote wrongfully.
All of the allegedlys, all of them. Allegedly everything happened, okay? And so now all of a sudden you've got this Liberal Party now that have a majority and are hanging on to it. And the arrogance, Graydon, the pure utter arrogance that we're seeing out of these people, from the backbencher to the premier himself, is deplorable in every single way. And to form this committee now, John Hogan coming out using political doublespeak, there may be issues, there may not be issues. What do you think, John? Or you think everything you say can and will be used against you in the court of law? That's why you're saying things the way you're saying them, because you're frightened to death. All of this is before the courts here now, John. You don't have a legitimate mandate. That's why you're double speaking here. So he has the gall then to say, oh, well, maybe if we form an all-party committee, people will calm down a little bit.
So Rudy, let me ask you something here. I didn't hear anything about. So the other all-party committee, was that automatically dissolved when the House of Assembly was dissolved?
I don't know. I think, you and I know exactly where the premier stood on that committee. So maybe he's giving this one a little more thought, Graydon, because his last quote with the previous all-party committee was, "I haven't even given that much thought." So maybe he's giving this one a little bit more thought. Maybe he finally woke up and said, hey, maybe this is something I should pay attention to. I realize that the province has a lot of issues, Graydon. God knows we have a lot of issues, and there's a lot of things going on. But this is major. This is something that we cannot ignore, because if we ignore this, then the whole structure falls down. This is our foundation. Democratic reform is our foundation. And arguably, this is why the House is a little bit shaky as it is, Graydon, because all of a sudden, all of these things that we've been doing have come up against us and have made things, not as stable as we once thought they were. I mean, our financial system is teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. No matter what the premier says, it's teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. We can't ignore that. Why is that? Because we've allowed a system of corruption for 70 plus years, where politicians made decisions that were not in the best interest of the people of the province, but were in the best interest of themselves, that were self-serving, that was getting them further ahead in their political careers with their golden parachute pensions and so on and so forth. So, Graydon, I mean, right now I'm at the point where I truly believe that as a people in this province, we cannot be complacent anymore. And if anybody is listening to this, let me tell you something. You don't think this affects you? This absolutely affects you.
This is the thing, Rudy. I think that the message that needs to get out there is that this every decision that's made by a majority government, or by any government, whether majority or minority, and some people say, well, there's no point, there's no difference. Basically they say what odds, but this, and not only is this affecting me, but I think about my children, my grandchildren that are coming after me.
Absolutely.
And these are the groups that's going to be finding themselves in an awful, awful situation.
Absolutely, Graydon, and that's why I'm so passionate about this. That's why I feel that we need to be doing more as a people. We need to be doing more, because we cannot leave this burden for people down the road. And I mean, I gotta say, I'm not an old guy by any means. I want to retire someday, and I'm looking at this and I'm saying, my goodness, if I ever want to retire, something's going to have to change, because I'm not going to be able to afford to live here. I'm not going to be able to afford to ever retire and live on a quote unquote fixed income per se. I just don't see where it's going to happen unless something majorly changes, and it starts with putting accountabilities in place, not giving people the power to do whatever they want, not giving people the ability to just strike a pin and just say, hey, this is what we're going to do because it's best thing for us and best thing for our friends and best thing for the people who donated money so that I won my campaign. That's what needs to happen here. Democratic reform is the foundation of everything, and we cannot leave it in the hands of a partisan, a liberal party like we are doing now. And whatever John Hogan says, he's wrong. Whatever he's saying that there's no issues, he's wrong. There were issues, and he knows there was issues, and it's time that he admits it.
And Rudy, the thing about it is, getting back to a majority government, we now have a majority government who doesn't need any support from opposition parties whatsoever to pass something through. Okay?
Right.
So here we have it again. Whatever they decide, whatever legislation they want to put forth, and there's a number of things in the House of Assembly right now, pieces of legislation, and I'll be honest here. There are some things they're talking about that I think is good, and it's going to be good for the province if it's followed through on and all of that. But in looking at it in a general point, we know what we've seen in the past, and all indications is that once again, we're going to see opposition parties raising their voices and saying, look, this is not right. This is not the way it should be done. We need to talk about this. But of course, a majority government can push it through. And the only way that we are going to see any substantial change in this province is if the people, the voters, rise up and start making noise and letting their voices be heard and stand and say, oh, no, this is not. And it's pressure from the public that's going to make the difference. It's not pressure from across the House of Assembly. It's got to come from the voters of Newfoundland and Labrador.
Yeah. That's right. And everybody watching this, like I said, you'd think it's not affecting you, but it absolutely is. It's
Yeah.
affecting you. It's affecting me. It's affecting our children, our grandchildren, like you said, Graydon. So I encourage everybody, anybody who's watching this, whether it's live right now, whether it's down the road and you're catching a replay of this, reach out, find out who your MHA is, reach out to them, whatever color shirt they wear, whichever side of the house they sit on. It does not matter whatsoever. Reach out to them and say, listen, as a voter, I am very concerned about what's happening in this province when it comes to democracy. I believe our democracy is fragile. I believe our elections are fragile. I believe the last election was rampant with inconsistencies, and I'm concerned that we even have a legitimate government right now. I want you to speak up. Say to your MHA, I want you to speak up. I want you to be my voice. Whatever side of the aisle, whatever side of the bus you sit on here, I want you to be the person that speaks up and says, I have concerns and I need to see an independent investigation on what happened with the 2021 election. And until people do that, we're not going to see anything change. It's in the hands of the people. But Graydon, I mean, so I mean that's that. There's a lot to talk about here now. Obviously, I mean, moving on here, we've got the federal budget that came down this week. So one thing that really stood out is a $15 minimum wage. This is something you and I have been advocating for a long time. But I noticed that even after the minimum wage came out, Siobhan Cody, the Minister of Finance for Newfoundland, was very quick to say that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to automatically apply to Newfoundland and Labrador.
Absolutely. So this 15, and tell me now, Rudy, if I'm right or wrong. So this $15 minimum wage is for federal employees.
This is basically a federally regulated industries. Anything federally together, federally legislated, or federal employees or federal industries and so on and so forth. This is a minimum wage for anyone working federally. So
Rudy, do you think this is going to put extra pressure on the provincial government to make this, or do we have a provincial government that says, we want the feds to help us, but when it comes to telling us what we're going to do with how much we're going to pay our workers, our essential workers and workers across Newfoundland and Labrador, they're still saying we have a plan and our plan is blah, 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 and we're going to do it on our time.
Well, it's interesting. It's going to be interesting, to be honest with you, Graydon, to see what does happen, because number one, I mean, Justin Trudeau or Andrew Furey says that he's, very buddy with Justin Trudeau. He says he talks to Ottawa daily. Now, whether or not that's Justin Trudeau, I don't know. Might be his father, might be Brian Tobin, who knows? But he says he talks to Ottawa daily, and so I mean he's going to have the answer for this now. So I mean he's come out in the past and said that he doesn't support a $15 minimum wage. That was very clear during the election. He was asked the question directly. He was told, he said that he supports raising it with the consumer price index, which we've talked about before, is very unfair. And we need to, and he believes that that's the way to go. So it's going to be interesting to see now if the province does face any pressure. He
agreed with growing the size of government.
Exactly. He added 2 extra cabinet seats, right? But so I mean, it's going to be interesting based on Minister Cody's response right out of the gate. I thought it was very interesting, to be honest with you, that she would come out and this is what she would say, that we have our own legislation and we have our own way of determining minimum wage and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, it's very, very interesting to see that they're kind of doubling down and they're going against the federal government in this regard. But I mean, the thing is, Graydon, and it was pointed out, I mean, even the federal Liberal Party, they basically ate their own words, because in 2015, the NDP were crying out for a $15 minimum wage. In fact, the federal NDP has been calling for a $15 minimum wage since 2008. So in the year 2008, they wanted a $15 minimum wage. So here we are now, all these years later, and we're just seeing it. And in 2015, I saw someone point out a tweet that the Liberals put out, basically saying that, the NDP policy was a pipe dream, and it was, it wasn't good policy, and on and on and on. And here they are today now, wording it very, very carefully to not try and eat your own words, but in reality, that's what they're doing. They're going back.
And Rudy, the thing about it is, the federal government is still in a minority government situation, and
facing an election.
And there is enough. I think there's enough meat on the bones of this budget that the NDP will be able to stand up and say, "Oh, look, they came across and they satisfied our demands here." Now, not everything, but I think they went along enough with what was being proposed by the NDP to say, we only need one other party to support us on this, and we're going to get this passed through. And again, we see that's going to happen, and I'm suspecting that this is going to be the budget that they needed to form a majority government in Ottawa.
Yeah. I mean, well, you and I had the conversation just after the budget came out, when I asked you, I hadn't seen it yet, and you had, and I asked you what it was like, and what was it you said? That there's money for everyone.
Yeah, there's money for everyone, and no matter who you are or what you do, you were included.
And my response was good, because I have a list.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's politics. That's budgets. Yeah. That's election year budgets.
Yeah,
and no doubt. Again, I'm the first to admit there's a bunch of things in this budget that I like, that I see, if it's followed through. I mean, we know that a lot of these things, again, is spread out over X number of years, and a lot of things can happen within that span of time. But generally speaking, from a Newfoundlander and Labradorian, and from a person who's got a career and who's got a family and who's concerned about the province, as you mentioned, you are, I can see if they follow through on this, I think there's a lot of good things there, especially for families and small business and municipalities and entrepreneurs. And
but now, Graydon, the other side of this is, it's great that all these things are being promised and all these programs are coming out, and you know where I'm going with this here now.
Absolutely. I got the numbers right here.
Okay, so give them to me. What's the deficit? Where's the deficit at?
About $351 billion.
Awesome. So that's great. So
takes us to a $1.3 trillion debt.
Yes. So, I mean, here we are now, Graydon, in a pandemic. And I mean, we saw during the pandemic, and I mean, look, all the money spent during the pandemic was great. I cannot fault the government for what they did. I do have some issues with how they did some things, but I mean, we're dealing with a global pandemic. Everybody's out of work. I mean, supports need to be given. I understand that, whether or not people got served that shouldn't have got it, and whether they jumped the gun on some things, and whether it was, executed properly and all that kind of stuff. We can argue over semantics and stuff and logistics all day long, but I think that, when it comes to stimulating the economy and stuff, that's great, but we need to have some sort of balance here. I mean, Justin Trudeau was infamous for saying that the budget balances itself. Well, it hasn't so far, right? The government,
and it's only grown.
And it's only grown dramatically. It's grown. I mean, who would think, 10 years ago, who would think that we would reach $1 trillion in debt? I mean, that's only numbers that you see in the U.S., right? I mean, that's United States numbers, trillions. We don't deal with trillions in Canada. We're just, getting by, and we're very passive, very nice, very, very kind. We don't want big things. We just want a little bit of health care and stuff. You know what I mean? Like that's what we're known for. But I mean, I just can't believe that we're at this point. I mean, I love the programs. Programs are great, but my goodness, we've got to do something to control this spending.
And the thing about it is, like we've said many times before, Rudy, when we look at debt, and we'll bring it back to Newfoundland and Labrador now in a minute, but when we look at debt and we look at these massive numbers that are almost unimaginable for our country, that, like I said, it's not going to be you, probably, it's not going to be me, you or I, that's going to have to pay for that. But when our kids and our grandkids get out and make families for themselves, and they make a career for themselves, and their families are growing, and they want homes, they want toys, they want, and they got to live. Are they going to be able, are we going to be able to sustain this kind of thing? Like, I look at this budget and I say, as I look at it, it's got to be paid. So look down the road 10, 15, 20, 25 years, and it's got to be paid. Somebody has got to pay for this. And I look at the resources in this province. I look at the resources in Canada. Where's our resources going to be at that point in time? Are we going to be dependent on oil at that time? I don't think we are. Are some of the resources that we have now that we feel should be doing good for us, are these resources going to be around? I don't think a lot of them are, because they're non-renewable resources.
Yeah, it's very troubling, to be honest with you, Graydon. I'm looking down through the list here now, and some of the other things. $10 child care within the next 5 years. Our province, Newfoundland and Labrador, just announced $25 child care. So, what's that going to be? This is something now.
So this $10 a day daycare, the government of Newfoundland and Labrador certainly is going to have to pick up a share of that.
Well, that's the thing. Right now, we just put a whack of money into $25 a day daycare, and we're already being told that it's not enough. It's not actually going to get us where we need to be. So, how much more money are we going to need to put in for $10 a day daycare? And is that going to get us there? I'm under the understanding that this is something that is going to be negotiated with the provinces. So, are all provinces going to get on board with this? Can all provinces really afford $10?
And I suppose, Rudy, I was talking to some colleagues today about this, and I think one thing that might come out of this for the province of Newfoundland and Labrador. We've heard about junior kindergarten coming in and implementing that, and that's been talked about for a number of years. So I don't know if this will be one way the province might look and say, well, rather than have to spend all this money on daycare, maybe if we implemented and now got early kindergarten on the go, that would bring a whole bunch of students that we would not need to pay childcare for, but rather they'll be in a school and they'll be in junior kindergarten.
Yeah, it's a lot of different things, Graydon, a lot of things to consider. And where does it end? It's one of those things that, like I said, we entrust politicians and we elect politicians, and hopefully they try to make the right decisions. But at the end of the day, they're making decisions, it seems, that are best going to get them reelected, and the rest of it, who cares?
I think the rubric or that we got to use here, that's from my teaching, is that we got to look and see, how does it score on economic growth? How does it score on population growth? How does it score on, employment? How does it score on all those things? And I guess that's going to take some time to figure that out. But I think these will have to be the measures that we look at in order to assess and evaluate and reflect on this and see, with all the spending and all the programs and everything, we'll have to see what it actually does in 5 or 10 years for economic growth and the growth of even the country, but also the growth of Newfoundland and Labrador as a province.
Yeah, definitely. I want to move on now, Graydon, to another topic that's probably one of the most important ones that we're going to talk about here now. Healthcare. So we got some new things come out this week. Health Accord NL, I think they're called.
Yeah.
the Premier's Task Force on Healthcare, whatever they're called. They released their interim report, and it would appear that we're not doing that great.
Wow. Yeah, we're the unhealthiest.
Yeah,
We have the least amount of positivity out of our health outcomes, and we're the unhealthiest. But what did the report say? We are not stressed.
we're not stressed out. That's the main thing to take from this. Nobody is stressed out.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's one of those things that it's troubling, because I mean, healthcare is so vital to I mean, it's the one thing that we all share here.
Well,
Everybody.
healthy people provide healthy economies.
Exactly, right? And I mean, we can make the argument that, I mean, this week the Premier announced that we're sending doctors or nurses or something to Ontario, but yet we find out that, in Labrador we've got 30 something positions that aren't filled. We've had numerous criticism because of understaffing. I'm going to tell you, for me personally, I've got family who have some health troubles and stuff, and they recently called. Well, number one, I mean, they don't have a family doctor, because in rural Newfoundland they can't keep enough doctors to maintain a family doctor. So they had a specialist appointment, and the specialist asked who their family doctor was, and they genuinely didn't know what to tell them, because they didn't know who it was anymore. But on top of that, to get an appointment with a family doctor now, it's I think the earliest one, a family member told me, the earliest one that they could get was the 31st of May.
Yeah.
In at the local hospital here in our area. So I mean,
Well,
right
it's
now,
affecting every aspect of the health system, because I mean, I know back some time ago I had to go to the doctor and get some blood work done, and I had to call. Well, first when I called, Western Health wasn't making appointments for blood work.
right?
They told me they're not
Yeah,
making appointments, so that was on hold. Then
yeah,
when I did get an appointment, you're talking 4 to 6 weeks
yes,
before you can get blood work done.
yeah. And most of the appointments now that people are making are just phone appointments.
Yeah.
So I mean, here you are now. I mean, you've got a family doctor who you're trying to see about an issue, whatever that issue may be, and they're just talking to you over the phone. There's no exam. There's no physical exam. I know someone who twisted their knee in the accident or whatever. Anyways, they accidentally twisted their knee, and they were having trouble walking. So they called the hospital, and they said, I need to make an appointment with the doctor to see about my knee. And they said, well, all we're doing is phone appointments. And he said, well, that's no good to me. Like, how can a doctor diagnose what's wrong with my knee? I need an x-ray. They said, well, we're not doing it. And he said, well, what's my options here? Like, what do I do? I mean, like, it's very frustrating, Graydon, now how like the healthcare system is functioning.
And Rudy,
right now.
just to talk a little bit about that, because I mean, I've had so many people talk to me about, like, back when the pandemic started, and I understand all about the precautions and all of that stuff, and I'll always say that the leaders in Newfoundland and Labrador did a great job in finding us where we are today, and you can't say that enough. However, I had so many people talk to me about how the health system shut down when it came to, like you said, appointments, surgeries, elective surgeries and things, that were not life-threatening, whatever. But in the process of that, Rudy, many people, because they couldn't get to these appointments and get these procedures done, they got sicker and sicker.
Yes.
And they find themselves now in dire situations because of this very thing. So my question was, in reviewing our health care now, in this health accord coming out, are we reflecting on how unprepared we were for such a crisis? in looking after the health of Newfoundlanders and Labradorians outside of COVID-19. And there's lots of things that people will tell you, their encounters, and I believe them. People have no reason to lie about this. The encounters they have had throughout this whole thing, a lot of it was not necessary.
Yeah, and I mean, and you're exactly right, Graydon. And we've heard stories of people who had elective operations and elective procedures and stuff like you said that wasn't life threatening, but was also serious. It was things, like someone with a gallbladder issue, and they're waiting for gallbladder surgery to get their gallbladder out. So now all of a sudden that person is forced to live in pain for longer because the healthcare system was shut down. And I mean, it's crazy that this is where we find ourselves. But I mean, I don't know where the solution is for this, because I mean, we know that we have a healthcare crisis in this province. We know that we have a health crisis in this province. Number one. But I mean, we spend more per capita than any other province in Newfoundland.
We're the unhealthiest people in Canada.
We spend the most money, but we're the unhealthiest people. So I mean, explain that to me, right? So I mean, one has to wonder, like, I mean, what's the problem? What's the silver bullet here? What's the thing that's dragging us down so much? Is it the fact that we're so rural and we have all these hospitals open, like Saskatchewan was in financial trouble back in the 90s and they had to shut down hospitals and stuff? Is that where we've got to go with it? Are we forced to lay people off? I mean, I can't find a doctor, so I don't think we've got too many doctors that we're paying the salaries for. I mean, what is the issue, Graydon? Like, what's
the bottom
going on
line,
there?
Rudy, is that if people are living in rural Newfoundland, and they always have been and they always will be, there will always be a rural Newfoundland. The bottom line is, if people are living in these places, then they have to be provided with services in order to be healthy and safe.
Yeah.
Now we have to look at this health accord, and again, this is not the be all end all of this accord. We don't have the final recommendations and all of that stuff, but hopefully when this comes to be and we are shown the recommendations, that it's showing us how we can have a sustainable and viable healthcare system throughout every part of Newfoundland and Labrador where people are living.
I hope it is. I mean, it's going to be a challenge. I mean, whoever comes up with a plan or whatever is going to be a challenge. And you know what? I don't think that we're going to go unscathed here. I think that some things have to get, quote unquote, worse for us to, get things better. But at the end of the day, I mean, I know that, like you said, people need healthcare. Everybody needs healthcare. It's the one thing that we all avail of. Okay. Everybody, or we're going to avail of it someday. I mean, everybody is going to have some encounter with this healthcare system. So we need to get it right. That's for sure.
William made an interesting point here. He said an increased minimum wage will improve general health and reduce overall healthcare costs.
Yeah, that's true, because I mean, one of the big deterrents, I mean, we know this, Graydon, and studies have shown this, is access to healthy food. That's the biggest. That's a huge issue, and I mean, especially in rural parts of the province. And I mean, the fact of the matter is, I mean, who's going to go to a grocery store? And my wife and I have commented on this so many times, because we go to the store, and I mean, milk is almost $6 a carton. The juice and water and stuff that's kind of healthier for you is so expensive. But yet here we have Coca-Cola on sale, 12 bottles for like 99 cents.
Rudy, that's the thing about it. And I mean, you and I understand. We both you and I have good jobs. We're doing okay. But when I go to the grocery store to pick up groceries, and I come home with, 5 or 6 bags of groceries to, not the big shopping bags, but the recyclable
Right.
bags. You
Yeah.
come home with 5 or 6 of those and it costs you $250
Yeah.
plus
Well,
because I've decided to eat somewhat healthy.
yeah,
I don't understand how people on a fixed income or a single
they
income
don't.
home with a
They don't.
family,
They don't.
how they're making it.
They don't, Graydon. And that's the bottom line. That's the cold hard facts. They don't make it, and that's why we have such an issue here. I mean, there's no way someone that like you said now with a family and feeding a family, and I mean, I've talked to people that have a family with 2 children and growing children, maybe teenagers or whatever. I mean, they're paying $300 or $400 a week for groceries
And they
because
want to have a life.
they want to have a life. So I mean, uh, at the end of the day, I mean, what do I do? Do I put gas in the car to go to work? Do I pay for the extracurricular activity? Do I, put the kid in piano lessons, or do I buy healthier groceries? And more people, I feel, so not everybody, but I mean, more and more people are really picking the latter choice. They're saying, I'm not going to buy the healthier stuff. I'm going to buy the no name brand stuff, and I'm not going to buy juice and water and milk and stuff. I'm going to buy the soda that's on sale for $2.99, and like it's a pandemic in and of itself, to be honest with
Yeah,
you,
absolutely.
because and then not only that, access to healthy food. Like I had a conversation today, actually. I mean, with somebody, it's impossible to get fresh fruit in this province. I mean, it's nearly impossible to get access to any type of fruit, and then the price of it is
You think
crazy.
about a bag of apples now, what a person got to pay. And I mean, apples is
Yeah,
something you see just about every
yeah,
home,
yeah,
but something you want to see in every home.
right,
But I mean, you got to go pay $7 for a bag of apples and plus
yeah,
more than that.
exactly. So
It's
I
a
mean,
very
yeah, and I mean, like a tray of grapes right now is in some parts of the province. I know, like you and I, we you don't live in a really rural part of the province, but I mean, I do. I live in a very rural part of the province, so I mean, it's more expensive to live here, and so if you are living in a small town where you've basically got one grocery store, or a local grocery store, or whatever, then all of a sudden, I mean, it's getting harder and harder to survive on a quote unquote healthy lifestyle. So that's something, I mean, that we need to address. And I mean, even some other parts of the province are even worse. Again, I look at areas in Labrador. I mean,
absolutely.
where you're paying $25 for a bottle of apple juice or something. So it's
Yeah.
craziness, right? We're quickly running out of time, Graydon. I mean, a lot of other things, a lot of other topics that we
Let's talk about a couple of good things that's going on, Rudy.
let's
Let's
talk about a couple of good things then.
Okay. Let's talk about the fact that government just said that no more bonuses for Nelcor.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the fact that they said we're going to freeze MHA salaries.
Yep.
I mean,
It's
small.
I'm sure these things are
Yeah, it's not.
popular with people.
Well, it's not going to solve the deficit, Graydon, but I mean, at least we can.
It's
We
the
can. We
principle
can.
of the thing.
It's the principle of the thing, and I mean, Steve Crocker, the government house leader today, he actually said that freezing freezing MHA salaries is not really going to change a whole lot, to be honest with you, because I mean, they did get modest increases. Now, Graydon, on the other hand, here, let's talk about something. $95,000 is not a lot of money when you consider when you put all things considered here. It's now, I know, yes, compared to what someone making on minimum wage, it's a lot of money, but
Yeah.
but from a relative point of view, it's, I mean, they're not living, it's what I would call an average good salary in Newfoundland and Labrador. I mean, there are a lot of people in Newfoundland and Labrador making in the ballpark north of $90,000.
There's a lot of people not making it.
I agree, but we're looking at the positives here now too.
Yeah. But
Right?
the thing about it is we got to be very careful, I guess, when we talk, and we know people are listening and saying, "Are you kidding me?" 90. If I could make $95,000 for 1 year in my life,
Absolutely.
But I understand what you're saying. Absolutely.
I totally,
But Rudy,
empathize
that's a
with that.
base salary. That's a base salary.
Exactly. And I
And you
mean,
look at all the other things.
then you've got expenses. Then you've got
Committee
the
bonuses.
committee bonuses. If you got ministerial salaries and stuff. So I mean, look, I'm not saying that MHAs are suffering, although there was a interesting discussion today on Twitter saying, that one person was a big proponent and admits it's an unpopular opinion that MHA should be making more. I don't necessarily agree with that, but it's it's a thought that's out there. But I agree with you. They're not suffering, but like I said, there are thoughts out there that says that an MHA salary, I mean, is kind of modest, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I understand,
Yeah.
but in the
Comparative to the fact that the CEO of Nalcor has a bonus of $300,000.
Yeah, though we don't have time to go there, Rudy.
When some of these bonuses from Nalcor were higher, just the bonuses, not their salaries, the bonuses were higher than the MHA salaries. So I mean,
double the MHA salaries.
Double the MHA salaries in some cases. I mean, you got I mean, a rig worker now making well over $100,000 a year. You've got a lot of rotational workers in the province, people in the mining industry. I mean, in my area, mining is a big thing. And I mean, mining has good salaries. We've got mining in Labrador that's making good salaries, tradespeople, electricians, and so on and so forth. I mean, you've got a lot of people, Graydon, working in a lot of industries in this province.
That's the reason we need to fight. That's the reason we need to fight that Newfoundlanders and Labradorians are given priority when it comes to trades jobs and jobs in these industries in Newfoundland and Labrador. That's why I believe. That's the reason I believe if it's our resources, if it's our jobs, we need to benefit first and benefit most.
Absolutely.
I want to go somewhere else, Rudy, before we leave.
Yeah.
One other thing. The ad in the Globe and Mail. What do you think? We got to mention it.
We've got to talk about it.
If you're going to work from home, then Newfoundland and Labrador is the best place for you to do it.
Yeah, and let's talk about working from your kitchen table, and let's put a picture of a rock out in the middle of the ocean up there. I mean,
yeah.
I heard Jerry Byrne on with Ted Blades today, and he was talking about it. So we've spent $100,000 on this.
Yes.
We spent $100,000 on a series of ads in the Globe and Mail, a social media campaign, some ads and stuff on social media, and so on and so forth. And so altogether, it's costing us about $100,000. We're way behind Nova Scotia. Nova Scotia has already put their best foot forward on this. Jerry Byrne says, well, that was because we missed the boat because we had an election and we got delayed on the election, and this was apparently honest hand to God, Graydon. That's what the man said, and so we weren't allowed to spend money. So basically, the impression that I got from him was this campaign was basically ready to go. We just had to get the minister in there, and Jerry Byrne had to sign off on it, basically, because money wasn't allowed to be spent during the campaign. So because of that, I mean, Nova Scotia's got a real nice website up, and they're way ahead. They've got their head to the ground here, and they're going full steam. So it's going to be interesting to see where Newfoundland and Labrador.
So what's the incentive here, Rudy? What's the incentive the government is dangling? What's the carrot that they're dangling there before the horse?
Yeah, and I think what they're saying is that Newfoundland and Labrador is such a wonderful place to live that you should come here and just live here and work remotely. But now, see, Graydon, you told me that we were going to talk about positive things, but then you had to bring this up. So now I've got to talk about it. So on top of that, though, we want you to come and live here, where in a place where you can't buy fresh fruit, where the price of groceries are through the roof, where it's one of the most expensive places to live, where we have probably the highest tax rate in the country, where you have incredibly terrible cell phone service, where the high-speed internet is more like dial-up, where you don't, but on top of it all, at least you can go down and sit down on the rock and watch the water come in off the
So
shore.
in doing this, Rudy, are we saying to these people, come and live in St. John's or Corner Brook or Grand Falls, Windsor, or
Well, I mean, we're
Goose
telling
Bay,
you,
or are we saying come and live in scenic, beautiful, peaceful, rural Newfoundland and Labrador?
well, this is the thing, and I'll tell you, the other thing that's interesting about this is that they're showing pictures here now of little rural communities and little, remote places that, honestly, Graydon, I don't think anybody even remotely expects somebody to leave Manitoba or leave Vancouver or leave Toronto or leave California and come and sit and tickle me armpits and work remotely from their kitchen table. I mean, if that's what they're going for, then they're as naive as they are. I won't say what they are. But anyways, I mean, Middle Cove, Logie Bay, Middle Cove, Outer Cove was recently promoted as the number 3 place in Canada to work remotely. But now we know that Logie Bay, Middle Cove, Outer Cove is also a spitting distance from St. John's, right?
Mhm.
So, I mean, is that what they're going for? If that's the case, then they should stop showing pictures of Grossmore. They should stop. They should take Twillingate out of the ad campaign. If that's the case, then put pictures of Logie Bay, Middle Cove, Outer Cove in the campaign. Put pictures of downtown St. John's in the campaign. Put pictures of Corner Brook in the campaign. If that's where you want people to go, and if that's where you expect people to go, unless they're going to improve the communications. And again, Graydon, this is another example of the provincial government putting the cart before the horse. We're putting this ad campaign out there, but we have no infrastructure in there to garner these people, to help these people, that we have nothing for them to do when they get here. We have no services really to offer them. And so why in the world would someone come to Newfoundland and Labrador and work remotely when we've got a government that's too lazy to get off their you-know-what and actually make life better for the people here? So anyways, Graydon, with that note, I think we're going to call it.
I really hope, I got to say, Rudy, I really hope that this is a successful campaign. I hope that people do, because I really believe we're living in one of the best places in the world. And I hope it's a successful campaign and it helps rebuild Newfoundland and Labrador.
Yeah, I do too. I genuinely do. I admit I'm not optimistic, and like Jerry Burns said today, there's no way even to track this. We have no measurement of success. So really, we're spending $100,000 and we're hoping for the best. And that's very indicative of Newfoundland and Labrador. That's very on brand, to be honest with you, for Newfoundland and Labrador. But anyways, it's good money for the Globe and Mail, apparently, and we're supporting an industry that is obviously dying. But good for the Globe and Mail for picking up the ad space from the provincial government of Newfoundland and Labrador. So great. Listen, we've said enough. We've said it all here this evening. There's lots more to even talk about. I never even got to the fact that Andrew Fury says that he's still working on fixing Muskrat Falls, fixing the financial things of Muskrat Falls. I don't think my heart can take it tonight, to be honest with you. Maybe we'll put it over for next week, and along with other things that.
And the fixed link, next week we got to talk about the fixed link.
The Atlantic Loop, and that's something else on the agenda for next week.
Yeah.
I will tell you, we can't divulge anything yet, but we are working on a very special guest for next week. We're very excited, and hopefully it works out. If not next week, then maybe the week after. We're not sure yet, but we're talking to some special guests, some people who are excited and willing and able to come on the show. and talk about all things Newfoundland and Labrador. So keep an eye out on our social media for that. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter and wherever social media can be found. My name is Rudy Norman. That is Graydon Pelley, sir. You have a wonderful night, Graydon.
You too. Take care.
All right, folks. Thanks for tuning in.